People always say that fame gives you everything. Bright lights, red carpets, expensive clothes, and people cheering your name everywhere you go. But for Keanu Reeves, fame never felt like that. It always felt heavy, like something he had to carry, not something he wanted to show off. He was known for being humble, quiet, and kind. But even the kindest heart can get tired of being alone. The story begins on a day that seemed like any other. Keanu was walking out of a small local cafe in Los Angeles. He liked simple places like that. No crowds, no cameras, just silence and warm coffee. But that day, as he stepped onto the sidewalk, someone called his name in a soft, familiar voice. It was Sandra Bullock. She had a simple smile on her face, not a movie star smile, a real one, like someone who was happy just to see another human being. They had worked together years ago on a movie that the world loved, and people had always wondered if there was something more between them. But life had taken them in different directions, different cities, different relationships, different worlds. Still, something about their bond had never disappeared. Sandra laughed softly as she held a brown paper takeout bag in her hand. She said she ordered too much food, and she asked if Keanu wanted to share. The moment felt so simple, yet so warm, like something two old friends do without thinking. Keanu smiled. His eyes softened the way they always did when he was comfortable. Without hesitation, he said yes. They walked to a quiet bench behind the cafe. The wind was gentle. Trees moved above them like they were blessing the moment. Sandra opened the bag, and they began to eat straight from the containers. The world around them kept moving, but they sat still, like time had paused for them. But under the quiet smiles, something deeper was happening. Sandra watched Keanu closely. His face looked calm, but she could see the tiredness behind his eyes. It was the same look she saw many years ago when he was hurting silently, when he kept his pain private, hidden behind kindness. "You look like you haven't been sleeping," she said gently. Keanu didn't pretend. He didn't lie. He never believed in pretending to be fine. He said in a quiet voice, "I've just been thinking a lot. About life. About the things we lose. The things we try to hold on to. And sometimes how it feels like everything could disappear in a moment." Sandra didn't speak right away. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't try to make him feel better with empty words. She simply listened. And that was something no one had done for him in a long time. There was a moment of silence. Deep and real, the kind of silence that comes when hearts are open and unguarded. Then Sandra said something that surprised him. "Keanu, you don't always have to be the strong one." Her voice was soft, but her words carried weight. He looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't look away. There was no camera, no script, no audience. Just two souls who understood each other without explanation. That it was in that quiet moment, while sharing food on a simple wooden bench, that something inside Keanu shifted. Something small, but powerful. A reminder that even the strongest hearts need warmth, need connection, need someone who sees them as a person, not an image. Sandra's smile wasn't just happy. It was healing. And Keanu felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt seen. The days after that small moment on the bench felt different for Keanu. Something gentle had opened inside him, something he didn't realize he had closed. He kept thinking about the way Sandra looked at him, not like the world saw him, but like a person with a heart that could feel pain and joy. And it stayed with him. A week later, Sandra texted him. It was simple, like everything between them had always been. "I found another cafe with good food. Want to try it?" Keanu stared at the message for a long time, not because he didn't want to go, but because it had been so long since someone reached out just to spend time with him. Without needing anything, without expecting anything, he typed back one word. Yes, the cafe was small and warm, with soft lights and the smell of fresh bread. When he walked in, Sandra was already there, sitting at a table near the window. She had a warm scarf wrapped around her shoulders, and her hair was tied loosely, like she didn't want to impress anyone. And that made her more beautiful than any red carpet moment. She smiled when she saw him. That same soft, honest smile. They ordered food, and when the plates arrived, Sandra didn't use a fork or spoon. She took a piece with her hand and passed it to him. laughing because she accidentally dropped some sauce. He laughed too. It had been a long time since he laughed like that. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere deep, somewhere alive. For a moment, everything felt simple. But the world is never simple for long. As they ate, a group of people near the counter whispered. Phones came out. Camera lenses lifted. Keanu felt his chest tighten. He had learned how quickly peace could disappear. How quickly the world could turn something gentle into something loud. Sandra noticed too. Her eyes softened with concern, not annoyance. She leaned closer and whispered, "We can leave if you want." Keanu paused. He looked at her, then at the crowd, then back at her. Normally, he would run. But something inside him didn't want to run anymore. Not from this. Not from her. He shook his head. "No, I want to stay." There was strength in his voice. Not the kind that blocks feelings, but the kind that embraces them. Sandra nodded with understanding. But the whispers grew louder. And then someone approached their table. A young girl, maybe 16, with shaking hands and wide, emotional eyes. She looked nervous, like she didn't want to disturb them. But she also didn't want to miss the chance to speak. She looked at Keanu first, then Sandra. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't want to bother, I wanted to say thank you. Both of you. Your movies helped me when I felt like I was nobody." Her voice cracked slightly, like she was holding back something heavy. Keanu's single quotes as heart softened instantly. He had seen fans before, millions of them. But something about this girl was different. She wasn't looking at him like he was a star. She was looking at him like he was a reason she survived something painful. Keanu stood up slowly. He didn't sign anything. He didn't pose. He just hugged her, gentle, real, and the girl broke. Tears came, quiet but deep. Sandra watched, her eyes soft, her heart full. This moment showed Keanu something he had forgotten. Kindness isn't something the world takes from you. It is something you give, and it comes back in ways you never expect. And as they sat back down, Sandra said with a smile, "See, you think you carry the world alone, but you don't." And for the second time in 2 weeks, Keanu felt something warm inside his chest, something like hope. But hope is fragile. It doesn't always stay without being tested. The days that followed were gentle, filled with quiet messages and small moments. Sandra would send him a picture of a sunset. Keanu would send her a photo of a cup of tea. They shared silence comfortably, like two people who didn't need to fill every space with words. One evening, Sandra invited Keanu to her house. Nothing fancy, no event, no interviews, just home. When he arrived, he noticed how warm it felt. There were plants near the window, soft lights, and the smell of baked bread in the air. Her home felt lived in, real, safe as she greeted him barefoot, hair tied loosely again, wearing a simple white sweater. She didn't look like a Hollywood star. She looked like someone who understood peace. "I made dinner," she said. He smiled softly. "I can help." They cooked together in the kitchen. Sandra cut vegetables. Keanu stirred the sauce. They moved around each other without bumping, like they had done this 100 times before. There was no rush, no performance, just presence. It felt like something gentle and sacred. While they ate, they talked about life, not movies, not fame, real life, childhood memories, silent fears, the things that shaped them. But then, Sandra asked a question that made Keanu pause. "Keanu, when was the last time you felt like you were truly happy?" His fork stopped halfway. He didn't look up. He didn't answer for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "I don't know." The honesty of it hung in the air. Heavy, real. Sandra didn't try to comfort him with quick words. She only nodded slowly, accepting his truth. But Keanu felt the question lingering inside him long after dinner ended. As he walked home that night, the city lights felt distant, like everything was glowing, but nothing was alive. He reached his home, sat on his couch, and stared into the quiet darkness. No sounds, no voices, just the weight of loneliness sitting beside him. He realized he had been living life like a ghost, present, but not breathing. The next morning, the pictures from the cafe appeared online. Headlines formed. Keanu and Sandra reunited. Romantic lunch spotted. Rumors begin again. The world was always hungry for stories. that weren't theirs. Keanu's single quotes. Phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, messages, notifications, noise. But the one message that mattered came from Sandra. Are you okay? He wanted to say yes. He wanted to pretend everything was fine. But this time, something inside him couldn't hide. I feel overwhelmed, he wrote back. She replied instantly. I'm coming over. When she arrived, she didn't knock. She entered quietly and sat next to him on the couch. She didn't ask questions. She didn't tell him to talk. She didn't demand anything. She simply sat beside him. To people. To hearts. One silence. After a while, Keanu spoke. I don't know how to let myself be happy. His voice trembled. He wasn't crying, but the pain was deep and visible in the way he stared at the floor, like happiness was something far, unreachable. Sandra gently placed her hand over his. Not tight, not forceful, just there. Then we learned together, she whispered, and those words were not dramatic, not grand, not like a movie scene. They were real, the kind of real that reaches the heart without asking permission. Keanu looked at her hand, then at her eyes. And for the first time in a long time, he believed he didn't have to walk alone. The next few weeks felt like a quiet healing. Not quick, not perfect, just slow steps. Sometimes progress came in laughter and shared meals. Sometimes progress came in silence where neither of them spoke, but both felt safe. Sandra didn't try to fix Keanu. She didn't try to make him smile all the time. She simply stayed. And sometimes, staying is the greatest kind of love. One evening, they went for a walk. The sky was dim, painted with soft shades of pink and gold, the kind of sky that makes you stop and breathe. Keanu and Sandra walked side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. They talked about small things, flowers, music, childhood memories, and then the conversation shifted without warning. Do you ever feel like you're living for other people? Keanu asked quietly. Sandra nodded. All the time. People see us on screens and think they know us. They think our smiles are always real. But sometimes the camera turns off and we feel empty. Keanu listened. Her words echoed in his chest. He understood that emptiness too well. But just as the evening felt peaceful, a voice called from behind them. Keanu. Sandra, can we get a picture? A group of fans had recognized them. The moment of peace cracked. They turned around, and there were phones already pointed at them. Some fans were respectful, smiling kindly, but others pushed forward too quickly, their excitement turning into pressure. Keanu felt overwhelmed, not because he didn't love the fans, but because he wasn't ready for the world to take this moment away from him. Sandra gently stepped in front of him, her voice warm but firm. Hey, let's slow down. We're just having a quiet walk. One picture, then we'd like some space, okay? The group hesitated. Some nodded. One girl whispered, I'm sorry, which softened everything again. Keanu and Sandra stood close as the picture was taken. They smiled, but this smile was different. It wasn't fake, but it wasn't easy either. It was a smile that carried patience. After the fans walked away, Keanu exhaled slowly. His hands trembled just slightly. Sandra noticed. She didn't say it's okay. She didn't say be strong. She simply took his hand. Not for romance. Not for attention. Just to let him know she was there. He looked down at their hands, surprised, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he held her hand gently, like holding something fragile and precious. The walk continued in silence, but it was a softer silence now, the kind that brings peace. Later that night, they sat in Sandra's living room. A candle flickered softly on the table. Music played quietly in the background. Keanu seemed lost in thought again, caught between healing and old pain, Sandra said gently, you don't have to fight everything alone. Keanu looked at her. His eyes were tired, not from lack of sleep, but from years of carrying emotional storms without shelter. I'm afraid, he whispered. Of what? She asked softly. He took a slow breath. Of letting myself feel something again. Of losing again. Of caring too much and watching it disappear. His voice cracked at the end. The pain was raw, real. Sandra didn't interrupt. She didn't speak to fill the silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. If you hold your heart closed, nothing can hurt it, but nothing can heal it either. Her words were soft, but they struck deep. Keanu closed his eyes, his hands trembled, and then, for the first time in a very long time, a single tear slid down his cheek. Sandra reached out and wiped it away, not with pressure, but with the gentlest touch. A touch that said, "You are allowed to feel. You are allowed to heal." They sat there together, the room quiet, the world far away, and in that silence, something delicate and precious began to grow. Not romance. Not promises, but a safe place for the heart to breathe again. Healing is not a straight line. Some days feel soft and warm, like the world is opening again. Other days feel heavy, like old pain is reaching out to pull you back. For Keanu, progress came slowly, through moments that seemed ordinary but carried deep meaning. One afternoon, Sandra invited him to a small charity event at a children's hospital. She said it would be quiet, with no press, no flashing lights, no interviews, just connection. Keanu agreed, though part of him was nervous. He still feared being seen, not as a person, but as a symbol. When they arrived, the atmosphere was gentle. Children sat in small chairs, drawing, building puzzles, laughing softly with nurses. No one rushed toward him. No one asked for pictures. They simply looked at him with curiosity, not expectations. A little boy with short hair and bright eyes approached him. He held a small toy bus in his hand, the kind you see in old movies. He offered it to Keanu and said, "This one has superpowers. It can go anywhere, even when things are scary." Keanu knelt down slowly, bringing himself to the child's height. "Can I hold it?" he asked. The boy nodded quickly, happy and proud. Keanu held the toy carefully, as if it was made of glass. His voice was soft. "Thank you. I think I needed that today." Sandra watched from a few steps away. There was warmth in her eyes. She could see how Keanu's heart made space for others, even while his own was still mending. After the visit, they walked to the hospital garden. Trees swayed gently. Wind touched their faces like a slow, calming breath. Keanu sat on a bench, the toy bus still in his hand. Sandra sat beside him, close but not pressing. "You're good with people," she said. Keanu looked at her with surprise. "I don't feel like I am." "That's because you don't try to impress anyone," she replied. "You just show up, and that's rare." Her words stayed with him, and something inside him softened again. But peace is always tested. Later that week, pictures of him and Sandra at the hospital leaked online. Someone had taken them through a window. Headlines exploded. "Romance confirmed. Keanu and Sandra together again. Is there love?" Media created stories that were not theirs, and the quiet, fragile healing began to shake. Keanu felt the pressure return. His phone buzzed non-stop. People asking questions, people assuming, people claiming to know his heart. His chest felt tight again. The world was loud again. That evening, Sandra came to his home. When he opened the door, she saw the heaviness in his eyes. She didn't speak. She just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Not a romantic hug, a grounding one, a human one. Keanu closed his eyes. His breath trembled. He held her like he was afraid the world would pull her away. After a long moment, Sandra whispered, "We don't have to let them define our story." Keanu pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. Something in her gaze was steady, unshaken. "But what if we get hurt?" he asked quietly. Her answer was simple. "Then we get hurt. But at least it will be real, and real is worth it." Silence settled around them again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was warm. That night, they sat on the couch with no lights on. The city outside continued to move, loud and fast, but inside the room, everything was soft and slow. Their shoulders touched, their breaths matched. They didn't need to speak. Keanu realized something powerful. He didn't fear the world as much when she was beside him. Because with her, he didn't have to be a symbol. He could just be a man with a heart that was learning to beat again. Time passed gently, like the world was learning how to breathe slower with them. Healing didn't come with one big moment. It came through quiet mornings, shared meals, soft laughter, and conversations that didn't need to be deep to be meaningful. Sometimes they sat together without speaking for hours, and that silence felt like home. One late afternoon, Sandra called Keanu and said she wanted to show him something. Her voice sounded warm, almost excited. He agreed to meet her. She picked him up in her car, and they drove for a while, leaving the busy city behind. The sky was painted with fading gold, the kind that feels like a soft goodbye to daylight. They arrived at a small hill overlooking a quiet lake. The water was still, like glass. Birds flew slowly across the sky. Everything around them felt calm. They walked to a picnic table near the edge of the hill, and Sandra opened a paper bag filled with simple food, sandwiches, fruit, and warm tea in a thermos. Nothing fancy, just real. They sat together, sharing food like they did the first day. It felt like returning to a moment that mattered. Sandra watched the lake. Her voice came soft, thoughtful. Do you remember the first time we worked together? We laughed so much. We didn't try. It just happened. Keanu smiled gently. I remember. It felt easy. Life used to feel easy, she said. Keanu nodded. Sometimes we forget that it can feel that way again. The wind moved slowly through the trees. Sandra turned her head and looked at him. Keanu, she began, her voice calm. You don't owe the world anything more than who you are. He looked at her, truly hearing her this time. The world doesn't get to decide your heart, she continued. You do. Keanu felt something shift inside him. Not loud, not sudden. Just a quiet understanding that felt like strength returning after years of silence. But there was more he needed to say. Something he had never said out loud. I was afraid. He whispered. Afraid of letting someone be close. Afraid of losing again. Afraid that if I let myself feel anything, it would break me again. Sandra's eyes softened. She didn't move close. She didn't touch him. She just let the moment live. Feeling doesn't break you, she said. Holding everything inside does. Keanu took a slow breath. The air tasted like rain that hadn't fallen yet. You stayed, he said. She smiled, gentle and real. I stayed because you never pretended. You were always honest, even when you were hurting. They sat quietly after that, not as actors, not as stars, just as two hearts that found safety in each other's presence. And then something simple happened. They shared a laugh. A real one. Soft and warm. It felt like sunlight. It felt like release. They weren't announcing love. They weren't claiming each other. They weren't promising forever. They were simply choosing this moment, choosing to care, to trust, to try. As the sky dimmed and stars began to appear, Keanu looked out at the lake and realized something important. He was no longer alone in the world. Not because someone filled the loneliness for him, but because someone understood it with him. When they stood up to leave, Sandra squeezed his hand gently. He squeezed back. It wasn't dramatic. It was human. And for Keanu, that was everything. Hope was no longer something far away. It was standing beside him.